You ever watch someone get humiliated in public and think, this is about to go very badly for someone? Well, stick around, because what happens in this story is UNT just Karmit's as a masterclass in why you should never judge a book by its cover. And trust me, the twist, you won't see it coming. Picture this. A military mess hall. The kind where testosterone hangs in the air thicker than the smell of burned coffee and mystery meatloaf. It's pouring rain outside, turning the base into one giant mud pit. Inside, it's packed wall to wall, with Marines young, loud, full of that invincible energy that comes from never having faced real danger. They're shoving each other, cracking jokes, throwing napkins across tables. You know the vibe. And then there's her, sitting alone in the corner, back against the wall, eyes on both exits. She's small, maybe 5'6" in boots, dark hair pulled back so tight it looks like it hurts. Navy uniform, perfectly pressed, eating her terrible Thursday lunch, one methodical bite at a time. To everyone in that room, she's invisible. Just another desk jockey, another staff officer nobody needs to pay attention to. But here's the thing about being underestimated sometimes. It's the most dangerous position to be in. Now, here's where most people would argue, right? Logical. Reasonable. Which, of course, makes him angrier. Because this isn't about logic, it's about dominance. It's about the pecking order. Mashed potatoes hit the wall. Gravy explodes across the floor, and the entire mess hall erupts in laughter. She just stands there, perfectly still, gravy literally dripping off her boot. It's the new person getting put in their place. Just another day at the base, right? Wrong. So, incredibly wrong. See what nobody in that room knew what? This guy definitely couldn't have imagined is who she actually was. That woman has a small trident tattoo hidden behind her left ear. She earned it. And 3 months before this mess hall incident, she carried a dying teammate 600 meters through active combat in Afghanistan. In the dark, with a fractured collarbone. Alone. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's back up. She grew up without a mother, raised by her father who'd been Army Special Forces before a medical retirement brought him home for good. He taught her everything not just how to shoot or navigate by the stars, but something deeper. He taught her to be still, to observe, to wait. They'd sit on their back porch in Georgia for hours. Not talking, just watching the tree line. When she'd finally ask what they were looking for, he'd say they weren't looking for anything. They were learning to see what was already there. At 18, the day after high school graduation, she enlisted. Crushed boot camp, dominated medical training. And then, at 21, she volunteered for something that technically didn't exist. Yet the Navy's quiet experiment with letting women into special operations. This was before it was official policy. before anyone was paying attention. 14 women started the program with her 13 Keat. She didn't. The training was designed to break people. Freezing ocean water during Hell Week that turned your fingers into claws. Sand runs that destroyed your joints. Drowning exercises that made your lungs scream for mercy. And instructors, some genuinely concerned, some openly hostile, watching, waiting for her to ring that bell and walk away. She graduated at 23. Rose through the ranks, fast. By 27, she was attached to the most elite unit in naval special warfare, the kind that doesn't officially exist, as a combat medic. Not a full operator, not yet, but close enough that when they deployed to Afghanistan in late 2024, she went with them. The mission was supposed to be simple. 6-person team, fast rope, insertion, grab a Taliban logistics guy, get out clean. But when they breached the compound, the target wasn't there. His security team was, and they'd been waiting. The firefight lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes that felt like hours. 4 minutes during which she watched her element leader, lieutenant with 2 daughters back in Virginia, took multiple rounds. His body armor stopped the center mass shots, but the one that hit the soft tissue between his jaw and collarbone, that didn't stop. She dragged him behind cover while bullets cracked past close enough to feel the heat. She did everything right. Everything she'd been trained to do. Packed the wound, applied pressure, called for extraction. But the blood kept coming. That dark, arterial kind that means you're running out of time. He kept trying to give orders even as his airway filled with blood. His last words, spoken through a throat full of blood, was clear muscle memory from 1,000 door breaches. Collarbone fractured. She got back up and kept moving. Because leaving him wasn't an option. They gave her a medal for it 4 months later. Bronze Star with a Combat V. She accepted it with a handshake, filed it in a drawer, and never looked at it again. Because her teammate was still dead, his daughters still didn't have a father, and no piece of ribbon would change that. After medical leave and psychological evaluation, because apparently carrying your dead friend through a firefight means you need to talk to someone. She got reassigned to a desk job, light duty. Training liaison. Basically, a position designed to let her decompress without admitting she needed to decompress. When temporary orders came through for a week at this Marine base, assessing inter-service integration protocols, she volunteered immediately. Because sitting still made her think, and thinking brought her back to that compound. She'd been at the base 3 days when the mess hall incident happened. 3 days of sitting in boring briefings, taking notes, being professional and invisible, watching the culture, observing the dynamics, and now this guy had decided to make her his project. The next morning, the story had spread everywhere. The Navy officer who got put in her place. She heard about it third hand and didn't react, just went about her business. But over the next few days, it got worse. The guy made it personal. Blocking hallways, taking the last coffee, showing up at the gym to make loud comments about how little weight she was lifting. Always just subtle enough to avoid official trouble, but constant enough to wear anyone down. Most people would have reported it. Gone through proper channels, but she didn't. Not because she couldn't, but because she wanted to see how far it would go. She wanted to see what kind of culture this place really had when nobody was watching. Then came Monday, 0-5-15. Her phone rings. Battalion commander's voice, clipped and formal. Report at 600, PT uniform. She didn't ask why. Just sew it up. Turns out, they had a training evolution scheduled. 12-mile land navigation course through brutal terrain. Tactical problems at each checkpoint. 6-hour. Time limit. The provisional reconnaissance team was down 1 person. Would she like to fill in? It wasn't really a question. She glanced past the officers and saw him, the bully, from the mess hall, standing with 8 other Marines, grinning like Christmas came early. Oh, He thought this was going to be fun. He thought this was where she'd finally break. They dropped him at the start point at OC. 6 checkpoints, scattered across miles of dense forests, steep ridges, and terrain that actively wanted to kill you. No GPS, just map and compass and willpower. The team leader was an old-school gunnery sergeant with 14 years in, and he put the bully on point, which meant that guy would control their pace. What happened next? The bully tried to break her, set a punishing pace, practically running, trying to gas her out early. But here is the thing she'd run 12 miles, with a fractured collarbone and a dead man on her back. This was a warm-up. By the time they hit the first checkpoint, he was sucking wind, and she looked like she'd gone for a morning jog, checkpoint after checkpoint. The evolution continued. Rain started falling. The rain got worse. They hit a simulated ambush scenario with 2 casualties and were told they had 35 minutes to move 3 kilometers to the extraction point. 3 clicks in 35 minutes. Carrying casualties through mud and rain. Wheat full gear. The first 2 kilometers were hell. She and another Marine carried 1 casualty on an improvised stretcher made from pun. The rain came down in sheets. The trail turned into a river of mud. Her shoulders screamed. But she kept moving, because the bully was 20 meters ahead, constantly looking back, waiting for her to fail. By kilometer 2, her partner was fading. Farmstrong but not conditioned for this. She asked for a switch. The gunnery sergeant refused. No switches. You committed, you finish it, was a test. Always a test. So she made a decision. Called for a security person to trade places with the bully. Put him on the stretcher with her. The weight settled across both their shoulders like a collapsing building. And she picked up the pace, down through a flooded creek, up another brutal incline. Her vision tunneling, but she could hear him behind her gasping, stumbling, suffering. She went faster. He tried to match and nearly dropped the stretcher. The gunnery sergeant barked at him to hold it steady, or run the whole thing again tomorrow. They hit the extraction point with less than 4 minutes to spare. Everyone collapsed. Everyone except her. She set down her end carefully, checked the casualty's vitals, then stood there breathing steady while the bully lay on his back, staring at the sky like he'd survived a plane crash. 5 minutes later, a vehicle rolled up. The battalion commander climbed out and walked straight to her. They talked privately for a minute. Then he walked back to the group and called formation. What he said next changed everything. He pulled out his phone and read her unclassified service summary. Out loud. To everyone. Hospital corpsman. Volunteered for Naval Special Warfare at first woman in her class to graduate the program. Deployed to Afghanistan with an elite unit. Awarded a combat medal for evacuating a teammate under fire with a fractured collarbone. Currently holding a security clearance 3 levels above the battalion commander himself. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. The commander looked at the bully. You shoved a Naval Special Warfare operator in my mess hole. You called her names. You spent 4 days harassing an officer who could run circles around you in her sleep. The guy looked like he'd been punched in the gut. The paperwork took 3 days. He was demoted, forfeited half a month's pay, assigned extra duty, and transferred to another battalion. Not career-ending, but a black mark that would follow him for years. Wednesday afternoon, one of the officers found her at the gym. She was running on the treadmill, 6 miles in, barely breathing hard. He waited until she finished and asked if she was angry about having to prove herself when she shouldn't have had to. She shrugged. I've been proving myself my whole life. One more time doesn't change anything. But here's the thing, it did change something. The battalion commander wanted her to stay on for 6 months. Run, integration, training. Teach officers that capability doesn't always look the way they expect. That evening, she found herself back at the mess hall, nearly empty. She got her food and sat near the window. A minute later, the young Marine who'd been her partner on the stretcher sat across from her. He thanked her for making the switch. Said she could have let him fail. You didn't fail, she told him. You knew your limits and kept going. That's discipline. He hesitated, then asked how she keeps going when everyone's waiting for her to quit. She thought about her father, about her teammate dying in her arms, about every single person who'd ever told her she didn't belong. You find something bigger than yourself, she said quietly. Something worth suffering for. Then you hold on to it when everything else falls apart. The kid stood up, looking uncertain. For what it's worth, ma'am, you belong here. She watched him leave. Then she pulled out her phone and texted the commander. I'll take the assignment. The response came in seconds. Outstanding. Report. Monday. She finished her meal and walked out into the evening. Somewhere across base, Marines were running in formation, their cadence carrying in the cold air. Another day, another mission, another chance to prove she belonged. She touched the trident behind her ear one last time, then walked into the gathering dark, because there was work to do. There was always work to do. And she was exactly where she needed to be. So here's what you need to take away from this. That bully in the mess hall made the same mistake a lot of people make. He assumed that what he could see was all there was. He saw someone smaller, quieter, different, and he decided that meant weaker. He never imagined that the person he was mocking had done things he couldn't even comprehend, had carried weight he'd never be able to lift, had proven herself in ways he'd never have the opportunity to. The scariest people in the room are usually the ones nobody notices. The ones who don't need to prove anything because they've already done it. The ones who sit quietly in the corner, back to the wall, eyes on the exits. Because they've learned through experience that you never know when things might go sideways. Next time you're tempted to underestimate someone because they don't look like what you expect, remember this story. Remember that assumptions are expensive. And remember that the person you're about to disrespect might just be the one who could save your life, or in this case, carry it 600 meters through hell. If this story hit different, if it made you think twice about the quiet people in your life, go ahead and show some love. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. And hey, if you want more stories about people who prove that strength comes in unexpected packages, stick around, because the world is full of warriors who don't look like what you'd expect, and their stories deserve to be told.